Hello, welcome one and all to episode 119 of A Stitch in Time. Today is Tuesday, November 12th, 2019. Only it feels a lot like a Monday. It's the first day back after a long weekend. Yesterday was Remembrance Day here in Canada. That's the day we officially recognize our fallen soldiers. But for myself, and I think for a lot of people, the day has become one to pay tribute to all servicemen and women, past and present. Both my mother-in-law and father-in-law served during the Second World War, and my father-in-law went on to serve many more years in the Navy. So it's an important day for my husband's family. And I also had an uncle who served in World War II. So it's definitely a time to pay tribute to them and others who have sacrificed so much for our country, for our safety and peace. It's been a while, almost a month since I recorded, so in case you forget, my name is Carol. How have you been? I am Knitsnpurls on Ravelry, and I'm coming to you from my home in the Fraser Valley of British Columbia. Special hello to any new viewers. I'm so glad you've stopped by to check out the podcast. Fair warning, I might be a little rusty this week, at least that's how I'm feeling at the moment. The intro is always the hardest part, so once I get through this, hopefully everything will start flowing. I've recorded it about 6 zillion times already. And of course, hello to all of you returning viewers. Thanks so much for coming by once again to spend some time with me. I was going to record last Tuesday. That's what I told you I was going to do. And the truth of it is when it rolled around, I just didn't feel like it. And since this is supposed to be something I do for fun, I never want it to become a job. And so I opted to do other things instead. And the truth of it is that I didn't have a lot to talk about as far as knitting and other crafts go. In any case, we had returned the week before from our trip to Europe. We did a cruise from Athens to Venice. It was like a working holiday for my husband and me in tandem. And so while there was some downtime, the truth is I did not get much crafting done then. And so as it was, it's probably a good thing I waited a week because I definitely have a lot more knitting and some quilting related things to share with you this week. So settle on in. First things first, I will talk about the Elsa knit along that is going on in the Ravelry group. The Elsa socks are a pattern that I designed and published a few weeks ago. You can win a prize one of two ways. You can cast them on and chatter about them in the chatter thread, and if you do finish a pair, you can post a picture of your finished pair in the finished projects thread. And I will draw a prize from each thread after November 30th, which is when the knit along ends. And the prize for each thread is I just heard a weird noise. I have no idea what it is. Anyway, a prize here is a project bag that I have sewn, and it's the perfect size for a pair of socks. And you can see it's decorated with all these socks hanging on a clothesline and lined with this kind of aqua and white pinstripe fabric, and includes a pocket because pockets come in handy. So be sure to come by and participate in that if you so choose. There are 2 finished pairs now. They look great, and I'm really enjoying seeing the other socks that are also being knit up. It's quite a thrill to see the socks knit up in so many different colors and yarns and such. Speaking of socks, I do have a finished pair of socks to share with you. I had started these before we went away, and I did work on them a little bit, I guess in the car on the way to the airport, and a little bit on the plane there and back, but other than that, I really didn't touch them. So I had a lot more knitting to do on them once I got home. But they're done. Yay. The yarn is, let me see, check out my notes here. Regia 4-ply, We Love Denim, color 6669. And these are going to be a gift for my brother-in-law Ed for his birthday, which is coming up on the 21st. So I better get cracking and get these in the mail. He lives in Toronto. That's also the same day as my grandson's birthday, so I need to make sure to get his birthday card and gift together. At least I know what we're getting him. Anyway, so as you can see, it's kind of a self-striping, sort of a, not exact striping, but kind of striping yarn. And even though I tried, I did not manage to match them up perfectly. Oops, I just jiggled the camera there. The yarn did not match up perfectly, even when I was, had it kind of strung out trying to find the place to start them, you know, the identical place to start them. So they are a little bit off at the gusset and at the toes, but I don't care. Ed's not going to care, and there's not super noticeable. It is my usual sort of men's sock recipe. Cast on 72 stitches, work about 1.5 inches, 2x2 ribbing, go down the leg. This is a 7-inch leg. Because Ed's feet aren't too long, I can get away with a 7-inch cuff. Sometimes with men's socks I have to make it a little bit shorter if they have longer feet. Then I just did a traditional slip stitch, heel flap, and gusset, and rounded toe. So I have to say I'm really happy these are done. Men's socks take a lot longer to knit than ladies' socks because of course they have more stitches in them and their feet are longer, and face it, they're not usually quite as interesting to knit as women's socks. At least that's what I find. Most of the men in my life are like fairly traditional colors and patterns, although I have to say Ed is one I can go a little bit out of the box with. I just didn't happen to this time. So anyway, we'll get those in the mail the next day or two, so that he'll have them in time to open for his birthday. At least that's the plan. I am drinking some jasmine tea today, and it's very good in my little chickadee cup. Love chickadees. One of my favorite birds. So the truth is that one project has consumed the vast majority of my time and interest the past few weeks, and that is the butterfly or papillon shawl by Marin Melchior. It is a multicolored triangular shaped shawl that uses short rows to create these really cool, this really cool patterning within the shawl. And if you remember it, there was one in a booth, one displayed in a booth at Knit City this, I guess the end of September. Beginning of October, end of September, I think. Anyway, it caught my eye and I bought yarn for it. And the yarn that I had purchased was one that had been used for the samples. It's called Unique Fingering. It's by Earth Yarns, URTH, color 3012. And it's the this particular yarn has long color changes. And then it's paired with a solid color. So this was matched up with this skein of Art Yarns Merino Cloud in color 348. And I did start it in this combination, but I was concerned because this color, it is not showing up on my monitor or my screen here accurately. It's a deeper, a purpley fuchsia color. It looks very hot pink on my monitor, so I'm not sure how, or on my screen, not sure how it's going to how it's going to show up. Anyway, I was worried that it was going to be too close to this color in here, and that would kind of defeat the purpose, because the idea is that this color kind of outlines all these different areas. And so I started with that color, wasn't quite happy, and I dug through my stash and I came up with this skein of Sweet Georgia Yarns Tough Love Sock, and that is the Oceanside colorway. And I liked that combo a lot better. So I actually cast it on, I think, a couple times at home the day that we left on our holidays, and ended up taking it all out. I was trying different things. But I did want to take it on the plane because I thought it would be a good project. It would keep my attention, would be, you know, something more interesting than just a pair of plain stockinette socks. And it would still be quite a small project to work on, not, you know, requiring tons and tons of yarn and such. And I did work on it on the plane on the way there. And I worked on it off and on once we were in our cabin on the ship various times. And I ended up ripping it all back in the end and starting it all over again at home, because I kept searching for the right combination of techniques and color combinations that I was happy with. So trying to think how much to talk about. Why don't I show it to you, and then I will talk more about its construction. This is so fun. It was such a fun project to work on, and it's so cool. Look how neat is that. Isn't that amazing? Just the effect that can be made with all those short rows and the different color combinations. Bring that up, cover my face so you can see the whole thing. I just love this project. It was so fun watching how all the colors knit up. Now, so a couple of then of technical details, I guess. One thing I did is do my increases 2 stitches in from the side. The designer leaves some things kind of open, and maybe I would even say a little bit vague. She said that she slipped the first stitch on her samples. I did try that. I ended up not liking it much because I was carrying yarns along one side and I found it was kind of messy that way. She also did the increases, I think it was 1 stitch in from the edge. I preferred the look of 2, and especially when I was adding in a new color, it just seemed to work better that way. So it meant I had to adjust some of the row numbers, like the stitch numbers that were put in the instructions, but because I knew where I was doing the increases, it wasn't difficult to do. She says she used make one right and make one left, but she doesn't actually tell you where to use them. She just puts make one. So what I ended up doing is at the beginning of my row, I would knit 2, I would make one left, come to the center stitch, make one right, knit the center stitch, make one left, and then go to the 2 stitches before the end and then make one right. And that was in the end what I was most happy with. I also you could see my skeins of the yarn were very different, even though they're the same dye lot. And I wanted to make sure that I was able to incorporate the colors from both skeins in the shawl. And so what I ended up doing is alternating skeins. And so each section is basically done with one yarn. I'm going to bring, let's see, I don't want to give anything away. If I bring this close up, you might be able to see that you, like if you look at this blue, for instance, you would begin that blue color, work your whole row, including short row sections here and short row sections there, all the way to the end. And then you alternate each of those rows with your, well, they call it the contrasting color. I think of it as the main color. So you have very specific sections that you can do with each color. And so what I would do is do one section with one skein, do my contrasting color, then do the next section with the other skein, and I alternated them all the way down the shawl. And that way I was able to incorporate all of the colors throughout the shawl and not be limited to it, because for instance, this color only appeared in one of the skeins, and this kind of there's like a pair of purple that was only in the other skein, and I really wanted to be able to use all of them. So I think other than that, I did it as written, and I just enjoyed it so much. Going from section to section to section, it was very motivating to finish one section, do the little dividing line, and then start the next one and just see how it all knit up. So very, very pleased with that. Now I have to confess that if you've watched for any length of time, you know how much I like to control things as far as having colors match, or I don't like doing random socks. I like them to match as exactly as they can. I was a bit disappointed at the beginning of this shawl because you could see that this sort of lime green ended up on this side of the shawl, but not really on this side in this section. And I was trying to manipulate that a little bit, and then at some point you just kind of have to let it go. And in the overall effect, it's not super noticeable because there are other colors, all the way through. In the end, it didn't matter, but it bothered me at the time. And I had it in my mind that when I finished this one, I wanted to do another that was more exact. And there is a version that you can do, that I just showed you the picture, that you can use the same colors. There are five colors that you can distribute throughout in very specific places. And I decided that I really wanted to do that for another one. And so when I cast this one off, I immediately went in search for other yarn to do a second one. I'm just going to lean out of screen here a bit so I can fold this over. Actually, you know what I'm going to do is actually tuck it over my shoulders because it has cooled down a bit. It is raining a bit today. We've actually had a beautiful stretch of, or a long stretch of really nice weather, but we are back to rain here, and I'm feeling the dampness a little bit this morning. So it's funny because I calling this episode the butterfly effect. Just most of the times I struggle to come up with an episode title after I've recorded and edited it. Sometimes it's the very last thing that happens. This one kind of got in my mind, and then I've heard that expression and I wasn't really sure what it meant. And it has to do, the best I can explain it, it's a scientific thing, and it's generally speaking the idea that a small thing can affect something else in a big way. So the idea is that like a hurricane can be affected by the flapping of a butterfly's wings. So I sort of was thinking about about that in terms of this shawl. Well, the butterfly effect is this butterfly shawl has had a huge effect on me in that I don't want to knit on anything else. B, I rarely knit things twice, and here I am knitting my second and planning a third. And also it's just the idea of which kind of yarns you use and how you use them can create an entirely different effect on the shawl. So I decided, again, actually chose colors that were similar to some that were used in here, kind of jewel tones. And so I have finished the first section, and you'll see what I mean about having a totally different effect than the one I knit before, simply by knitting each section in a solid color and in a different color. I'm calling this my stained glass butterfly because that's what it reminds me of. So I'm using black, which is, they call it the contrasting color. I call it the main color. But so for the contrasting color, so basically every section is divided by black. And that is, all of these yarns were in my stash. It's a Shibui sock in color 05, which is a black yarn. There's Shibui. You notice I don't have to struggle to read it as much. I got new contacts, and therefore I can read my close-up things a whole lot more easily than I could with my old pair. So it's kind of neat, kind of nice. I don't have to keep my reading glasses handy as often. Anyway, so then color 1, you can see a little bit in there, and then you can see a big section down here. That is Cherry Tree Hill Super Sock Select Solids in the Iris colorway. Whoops. So that is a merino silk blend, 80%, 20% silk. The next two colors, this green and this kind of limey green, are both Sweet Georgia Yarns Tough Love Sock. This one is Spruce and this one is Pistachio. There's the label. And that's a merino nylon blend. Then the blue is a skein of Indigo Moon Merino, and that is their Island Time Merino in Celestial Blue. So you've seen me working with Indigo Moon on Helen Stewart shawl I had been knitting before I went away. And you know, I did not end up wearing it at all on our trip. It's the warmest ship I've ever been on. I only wore a wrap or cover up of any sort once, and that was when we had a masquerade party out on deck one night, and it was cool. Other than that, I didn't need sweaters or anything in the evenings. Anyway, there's the... So it was a shame after all that work not to actually use it, but at least I have it on hand if I should need it in the future. And yeah, so I guess that's the... Oh, and then this color, I really wanted to use that Art Yarns yarn I had bought for the original one. And that's actually the black and this color were my starting point for this version. So as you can see, it is a totally different effect when you do each section in a different color and have it outlined by the same color. So again, really fun to see how this is working up. I'm excited to move on. This is I've just finished section 1. There are 3 sections that are divided by several rows of the black, and so I'm anxious to move on to section 2. So still holding my interest. And then another way that you can knit it is there is a supplementary page to the pattern when you buy it that is called Moth. And it is, it's more or less this, it's the same pattern except that it is using a contrast color and then kind of has a gradient version of the shawl, and then it has an alternate bind off. So there's like the Moth. So again, you can see it has, it's less random than the original one that I knit with the multicolored yarn, but it has a very different effect than the one that I am knitting now because of the way the colors are used. So I really, I am planning to knit a third one using that technique. I just think it'll be so interesting to see how they all take shape. So yeah, I am having a blast on that. I don't want to knit anything else. Having said that, I always need to have a pair of plain socks on the needle to work on, you know, when I'm traveling in the car or have a few minutes to kill, or, you know. And so I have cast on some Christmas socks out of West Yorkshire Spinners Signature 4-ply, and it's in the Candy Cane colorway, which is $9.89. And I bought this yarn at a yarn shop this past September on my way back from Edmonton with my mom. So candy cane, as you might expect, it's basically just red, green, and white or off-white stripes. And then I am going to do for sure heels, not sure about toes, in this complimentary West Yorkshire Spinner. Let's try that again. The camera shut off. It was the end of its 30-minute limit for that section. What I was saying is I am going to do heels, possibly also toes, in this coordinating yarn. Also from West Yorkshire Spinners. It is color 510 Cayenne Pepper. Matches the red in here really well. So yeah, that is the only other thing that I have been working on these past 2 weeks, because I have been butterfly obsessed. At least as far as knitting goes. I have done some quilting also. So we came home and everything just felt cold. We'd had really good weather while we were away, and even though we had nice weather here, it's definitely a damper cold, and it was just before Halloween. It's just a few days before Halloween when we got home, and so it definitely was a chill in the air. And so it was too warm to put my sock yarn blanket on the top of our bed. That was just way too heavy, way too warm. So we were in the habit, I have a couple of small quilts that I made that I have in the living room, and we got in the habit of getting one of those and just laying it across our bed sideways. The only thing is it would cover the top of our bed sideways, but it would leave either our feet or our shoulders uncovered. So it wasn't quite warm enough, and I thought, okay, I better get on it. I had started a quilt for the top of our bed earlier this year, I think somewhere like May or June, I think. And I had it in mind that it would be a lighter layer to use during the summer months, because we usually find our comforters too heavy and we end up just folding it back or taking it off during the summer. Well, I got part way and then I got distracted and I never did finish that quilt. So I decided it was time to get it done. So I'd had half of it done, half the it was done with a layer cake from Moda. It's Lilac Ridge is the pattern, the fabric pattern. And I had followed the double slice layer cake tutorial, and I will put a link in it on the show notes in case you're interested. It was a video link on YouTube that just explained how to do it. So I had done the first half, as I mentioned, and I had gone on to sew the second half of the blocks then that was done. So one half was, all the blocks were sewn and put together. Then I had the other half of the blocks sewn but not put together. And so that was the next step. So I went ahead and did that. And when I did that, I realized that I had sewn one half of the blocks differently than the first half of the blocks. And so they weren't quite the same. Okay, whatever. And I also had realized a while ago that once all the layer cakes were cut and sewn, the quilt top was going to be smaller than I had A, desired, and B, thought it would be. So I was trying to figure out a way to make it bigger. And the thing is that the layer cakes wasn't available anymore. I think the fabric must be discontinued. And all I could find, I had bought it originally on the Fat Quarter Shop, and all I could find were packs of mini charms. So those are 2.5 by 2.5 inch squares. And I saw online, there's something called a piano keyboarder where you can take strips of fabric and sew them together to make the border of your quilt. And that's often set off from the main part of the quilt with a strip of plain fabric. So that's what I decided to do, and even though it's not technically a piano keyboarder, it kind of is. And so last week I set my mind to it and worked steady for a few days and finished off this quilt. So the main blocks are done by taking 2 layer cake pieces, sewing them together, then cutting them in half and joining them up with another half, so that you have 4 different fabrics in a block. So what had happened is the first ones I did in that they looked like that. The second ones, these were offset, so I had the small piece here and the large piece there and vice versa. So, but when it was all put together, and actually you can't really tell unless you're looking for it. So then I had, at the time that I'd ordered these little mini charm packs, I noticed they have another fabric collection called, I think it's called Sweet Violet, by the same designer, has all the same colors in it. It's very, very similar to this one. And they had suggested this fabric as a possible match. And so I bought enough for this border here, plus for the backing. And then I had already purchased this fabric to use as a binding back when I bought the original layer cakes. So anyway, that's how I finished it off. So I put all of them together, and now the quilt covers the width of our bed completely and comes up to about pillow height lengthwise. So it's perfect for as an extra layer over top our regular comforter. So that gives you an idea of how the quilt looks. So I'll kind of stick it in front of me so you can see. So very, very happy with this. Love all the colors, love the fabrics, and it really is just the perfect extra layer. Now, something I'm kicking myself a little bit for is I did quilt as you go. So I did each block, I quilted it to quilt batting separately, I did the same with these strips, and I did it the same with these. So everything was all quilted to the quilt batting before I put the backing on. And so normally when I do that, I will stitch in the ditch around each block or do some sort of quilting on the front to quilt it to the back fabric. But I couldn't really do that this time because I'd used this stitch everywhere, so I couldn't very well go stitch over that with a plain, just a plain stitch. So what I did is I used, I can't remember what they call it, I'll put it down here. It's a stitch on my machine that basically looks like an asterisk or a little flower, and it connects, goes through all the layers and holds it in place. So basically I put it in every corner of every block. I did that. So it looks kind of like that on the back. Where is it? Can you see? And so I have numerous places on the back that they're regularly attached to, it's regularly attached from the front to the back with these stitches. Because of the thickness of the fabric and my tension, etc., some of them just look like a dog's breakfast. I don't know if you can see it. It looks awful. But you know what? We don't sleep with this side up. We sleep with the other side up, and it all blends in and you can't see it on this side. So it is fine. It's for myself. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's not a gift or anything. And so I am fine with that. So I'm going to go put this back on the bed. I've lost my shawl, which is just as well because I've gotten a little warm. So I will be right back to talk about some acquisitions. In here, I have what I'm calling my little box of Christmas. Before I'd gone away, I had placed an order with West Yorkshire Spinners. I knew that they had a new Christmas yarn out this year called Christmas Robin, and I really, really wanted it. And so I'd gone onto the West Yorkshire Spinners website and placed an order for it. And at the same time, I decided to get all the other Christmas colors that I didn't already own. I had recently picked up the candy cane color, but I didn't have the other ones that they put out in prior years. So they arrived while I was gone. So this is Christmas Robin, which I think, I meant to check or double check. I think you can find this both under like a section where it has the Christmas yarn and they feature it, but I think it's just called Robin somewhere else, like with their Country Birds collection. In any case, it's color 941, and I'm pretty sure whether it's called Robin or Christmas Robin, I'm pretty sure it's the same colorway. And again, I can use this cayenne pepper to do heels and toes if I so desire. I also got, I think this was the first Christmas color, which is Holly Berry 886, I think that says. That's my writing, by the way, because they don't put the color name on their yarns. And then this one is Fairy Lights. And I think that was, not sure if it was last year or the year before. So that's color 849. And this I actually have, so I could use the cayenne pepper with that one too. And I could use it with this one also. But I also have some of the plain blue, this kind of turquoise color. So I might use that to match these. I'm not sure yet. And they actually came with a couple of patterns. So this is the pattern for the Fairy Lights. Yeah, they just call it Fairy Lights Christmas Edition, designed by Winwick Mum. So that's how they'll look knit up. And then they also, I thought this was really nice. They got this red envelope, and inside it looks like a beautiful Christmas card. So there it says, Season's Greetings with the Robin. And then there's the Robin socks. The instructions are inside here. So they call them Christmas Robin socks, also by Winwick Mum. And they feature like a little cable, ribbing and a cable pattern up the back, I think. So whether or not I knit these particular socks for each of these yarns, I'm not sure, but that's a definite possibility. But I thought that was presented in such a nice way. And that was also came as a free pattern with the yarn. So then, since I arrived home, I have received from Fiber Nymph Dye Works an advent calendar yarn set that I had ordered, I think a few months ago. So that's pretty exciting. So I got this whole bag full of little packages of yarn. So one for every day from the 1st to the 24th of December. And I chose a combo. So I will have Bounce, which is a regular merino nylon blend, Bedazzled, which has Stellina, Heavenly, which has cashmere, and Mountain Tweed, which obviously is a tweed yarn. So I'm really excited about that. And then also I have a full skein of yarn to open on the 25th. So it says day 25. So I will definitely keep this a secret, and I'm really excited about seeing them. And then also in my box here I have the skein of Advent yarn that I bought at Knit City. So I'm going to have all sorts of fun with Christmas projects leading up, Christmas sock projects leading up till Christmas, because right now knitting, of course, on my candy cane socks, and then I'll move on to one of these when I'm done. And then I've also pulled out a couple of bags that I had sewn that have Christmas themes. I call this my ugly Christmas sweater bag. And then this one I love with the little birds and Christmas ornaments and snowflakes and such. So I've got those in the bag, in the box here, ready to go with my Advent projects. So super jazzed about that. And then when I was at Knit City, I was talking to one of the owners in the Midnight Cravings booths, and some yarn I had been looking at online, they didn't have it in their booth. And so just a little while ago, since I got home, I placed an order because I want to make Zweig by Caitlin Hunter. And I ordered some yarn for that. So I'm not going to take it out of the package. This just arrived this morning. So it's the Midnight Cravings. I ordered Lush, which is a 4-ply fingering 100% superwash merino. So I ordered 3 skeins in, this one's basil. And then this one you can see is cream with speckles. And it's mostly green, but has like little bits of yellow, if you can see that. And that's called Pesto, which I just think is wonderful. We actually had pasta with pesto for dinner last night, just as an aside. Anyway, so this is going to be my Zweig whenever I decide to get around to casting it on. Now that I have the yarn, I'm really tempted to buy the fabric and start that. But I do still have Granito on the go, so I don't know. We'll see if I give in to my impulses or if I'm well behaved, naughty or nice, I guess, as the case may be with Christmas coming up. So I don't know. We'll see. But I'm thrilled to get this exactly how I pictured it, and I think it's going to be a really nice sweater when it's done. So yeah, that is it for acquisitions. That's quite enough, don't you think? Lots of new yarn. I actually was feeling a little bit overwhelmed. Part of the reason I didn't record last week is just my craft room was just a disaster area, if the truth be told. And I really wanted to get it cleaned up before I sat down in here again and recorded. So I did do that last week. Went through and put away yarn purchases from Knit City and leftover yarn from different projects that I just had hanging around. And I finished up my quilt. That was part of my motivation also for finishing up my quilt, was to get that all done and put away. I had some project bags that were half done, so I finished sewing those up. And they're very similar to, it's the same fabric, but different combinations of ties and bottoms. So I got the rest of those finished. And other than all the stuff I have laid out here for recording today, which will get put away as soon as I'm done, everything in here looks a lot more tidy. I felt like I could then clear my mind and actually record. My next step is my office, because I never did get around to tidying that up, and it is, I don't even want to be in there. It's just, my desk is such a disaster area. So I feel like there's a lot to catch up on. It has been almost a month. I am not going to give you lots of details about our cruise, just not sure how interested you are, and a lot of it's sort of a blur by now. I'll tell you a little bit, and I'll put in a few pictures just to give you an idea. But normally on this kind of thing, I do a much longer recap, and I just don't feel, I feel like it's past that time, if you know what I mean. So yeah, we did do a cruise from Athens to Venice. We had a day in Athens before we left that included a get-together of the entire group. So this is a trip that my husband's company puts on every 2 years for their customers. It's like an incentive to purchase and then put that towards the trip. So we had a group of about 1,200 people, and we had booked a small cruise ship for the entire group. So we had our own itinerary and the ship to ourselves, which was a really unique experience. So we started in Athens. Cameron and I had been there before, and we'd spent several days there 10 years ago. So we didn't feel like we needed to brave the crowds at the Acropolis or anything like that. So we just basically did a tour that was called Athens Your Way, which gave you transportation to and from Athens, you know, and a drop-off and a pickup location. And that was perfect. We went, and actually it was really neat. The way they dropped us off, I recognized the area immediately. We had walked this area every day of our 3 days. So it was really neat to be able to say, oh, if we went up that street a few blocks, we'd get to the Olympic Stadium, and then we'd get to our hotel. We went this way, go to the Plaka, which is this whole area of shops and restaurants, and you can see the Acropolis, the Parthenon on the hill, and you know, it was just really neat to be back in a city and feel like it was familiar. So we walked just up the road to the Parliament buildings and watched the changing of the guards. It's quite a unique ceremony, and I did video it. So I won't put it in here now, but I will at the very end. I'll put in video of the changing of the guards there, because it's quite a unique ceremony. So we're lucky to catch that. They do it every hour. And then, so yeah, that day we just walked around a bit and then sat down at a restaurant. I told you I was rusty. So I did think ahead, and I plugged in the camera so that wouldn't run out of battery while I was recording. But I neglected to plug the extension cord into the power bar, and so guess what? I ran out of batteries while I was recording. So a little bit of time has passed. I've had a bite to eat, made a fresh cup of tea, and allowed the battery to recharge a bit. So it should be fine now. It's definitely plugged in now. Anyway, I think I was saying that I am going to put a video at the end of the episode that shows the changing of the guard at the Parliament buildings in Athens. It's quite a unique ceremony and kind of neat to watch. So that evening we had a welcome reception for the whole group and had a lovely dinner, and then we were treated to two concerts. If you're Canadian, you will no doubt recognize the name of Colin James. So he played first, and his rendition of Van Morrison's Into the Mystic is one of my all-time favorite songs, and I got to dance to it with my husband, Colin James, singing it live in person. What can be better than that? And then the second concert was the James Barker Band, which is a Canadian up-and-coming country group. I personally hadn't heard of them or heard them, but they were also very good. So then once we all got back to the ship, we left for our first destination, which was Githyon, Greece. And while we were there, Cameron and I did a really cool cave tour. The caves are right down by the water, so they are flooded with seawater, and you tour most of the tour takes place in a little flat-bottom boat, holds up to 6 people, plus the guide who has a pole and moves you through these caves. You can't like shift this way or that way, or you might upset the boat. You have to stay quite still, and every so often you get told to duck, and you have to like lean forward, put your head down, because you're going under stalactite or a low ceiling. Kind of like, it reminds me a little bit of Pirates of the Caribbean at Disneyland, minus the little downhill water thing, and no Johnny Depp in sight. But that was quite cool. We've done several different cave tours in different places. None in water like that before, so that was very cool. The next day we were in Corfu, Greece. We did a tour that included a walk through a traditional Corfu village. That was really interesting because the village has been there for hundreds of years, and it was just very interesting to see the juxtaposition between the old and the new. So for instance, these streets were never made for cars, and yet, of course, as time has passed, that's become the acceptable mode of transportation. And so you see these cars parked alongside these old homes and these narrow streets, other modern amenities. So it was quite interesting. And one of the houses is set up as a museum, so you can see what a traditional Corfu home would have looked like once upon a time. So of course my eyes were drawn to these spindles and other tools for processing the flax into linen, and then the loom that they used to weave cloth. So I'll put the pictures in, of course, for you so you can see too. And then after that we went to a winery and had a lovely meal there. All the food is just so fresh, you know. Olives are delicious, and beautiful vegetables, and the prosciutto, and it's just so good. The following day we were in Bari, Italy, and we toured 2 towns there. One was a walled city, old walled city, called, I never can say it, Polignano. And after that tour, we were all treated to gelato, which was amazing. And then we went to Arborabello, which we had seen on a TV show years ago. There are these traditional homes that were built from stones that had been used, had been cleared from the fields. And they either have outbuildings in the fields to hold all the agricultural tools, or then also houses called trulli, which are sort of rounded homes made from all these stones that are stacked without mortar. They're done in such a way that they don't use mortar, and then they have these peaked roofs, kind of like, they remind you of like what a hobbit house might look like. So that was a really neat thing to see. I think people, people still live in them. We went to this area with a lot of shops and restaurants and things, and these places are still being used today. So it was quite a neat thing to see. And then our next stop was Dubrovnik, Croatia. So we went to the old town and walked around the outer wall. If you are a Game of Thrones fan, that is where a lot of the series was filmed. You can even do like Games of Thrones tours. I've read the first book. I've never watched the series, but it was a beautiful place to visit regardless. And so much history, of course. The next day we were in Kotor, Montenegro, and we went out to the country and did a little cycling tour. I have not done a lot of cycling in my life. Once I got a handle on the gears, it was fine. It was mostly downhill, but there were a few uphills that were a little tough, but we did them. So I was pretty proud of that. And then that ended with another meal at kind of a family estate. Don't think huge, big countryside. It's just like a sort of like a farm, and again, beautiful fresh food from there. And then the next day we were in Split, Croatia, and drove out to a national park that is a site of an old grist mill and later of a hydroelectric dam, hydroelectric plant, which was I think dated from like the early 1900s. It's still in use. So you walk through this wooded area with streams everywhere, and then come out to these beautiful falls. And on our way out to that, we passed an old, I think it was an old fortress that was featured in season 4 of Game of Thrones. So again, another Game of Thrones reference if you are a fan. It was there were some on our bus that were quite excited to see it. And then our cruise finished in Venice. We were there for 2 days. So the first day we did a tour of a glass factory in Murano, very well known for the Venetian glass. Got a demonstration of how they do that. So actually I did film that, so I'll also put that at the end if you're interested to see that. Then we walked through the gallery. Unfortunately, you're not allowed to take any pictures, but oh my goodness, some beautiful sculptures and glassware. Just gorgeous. You're afraid to move in case you broke anything, because some of the pieces were worth thousands and thousands of dollars. From there we went to Murano, which is just another little island, and it features all these brightly colored homes. And the story is that all the houses were painted different colors so that sailors could find their way back home again. So we had lunch there with another couple and wandered around a bit. We would have happily spent more time there, but our tour took us off to another little island, which had an old church on it. But it was interesting, but we really preferred Murano to this other where we ended. But anyway, so the next day we had we had two sort of goals for the next day. The first was to find a souvenir for our grandson. He was the last one on the list, and we could not figure out what to get him. So we finally found a little something. And then the other aim was to find a restaurant and sit for a 2-hour lunch, enjoy some wine and Italian food, and watch people. So we found a restaurant right beside St. Mark's Cathedral, Basilica. I can't remember what the actual word is. The church anyway. Sat right beside there and just had a lovely, lovely time. we followed that up with a walk through Venice, had some more wonderful gelato, and just before we were going to head back to the ship, we stopped for a cup of tea, which ended up being our most expensive cup of tea ever. So we had 10 euros in cash left. We figured that would be plenty for 2 cups of tea. And so we'd finished up. I'd gone to the bathroom and Cameron paid, and he came out and he said, do you want to know how much our tea was? It was 13 euro for 2 cups of tea, but they did come with a chocolate and a little cookie each. So I'm sure that's what added the value to it. In any case, you know, you have to pay it, but definitely the most expensive cup of tea we will probably ever have. Good thing it was hot, because you know some places you get a cup of tea and it's lukewarm. At least it was hot and good. Anyway, that was our trip. We did have one night, the night before we got to Venice on the ship, there was a masquerade party for the group, and we both received masks. So this is my mask. So, and then this was Cameron's. So it was quite neat to walk around, and everybody's doing the same thing. They're kind of looking at each other and trying to see if you can figure out if you know the person behind the mask. In one case, a couple we've known for 20 years. We've seen them on these trips, you know, time after time, and have become quite good friends. So all of a sudden we see them, and the man is looking, and he spotted me because he couldn't recognize Cameron with his mask on. He's like, "Oh, it's Carol. Oh, that's Cameron." You know, it really is amazing how much it can hide your identity. Not to the point where you wouldn't know someone. Like, you know, is it, you know, the Lone Ranger who is that masked man? Well, okay, you're never going to be totally anonymous, but it really does change the way you look. So that was a fun night because everyone got dressed up in really nice clothes, and there was one couple that had gone all out and had old-fashioned clothes that, you know, you would see from, say, a couple 100 years ago, and just looked amazing. So that was a really fun night, one of the highlights also. So yeah, good trip. So I wasn't going to talk a lot about it. I guess I talked about it more than I thought, but hopefully from the odd photo and such, you'll get a sense of what we did. So then it was home, and I hadn't really thought about how much was going to be going on once we got home. So a couple days later, it was Halloween, so we went out trick-or-treating with the grandkids. We never get many people at our house anyway, and it's way more fun to be out with them and seeing all the costumes and stuff. So that's what we most often do on Halloween. So that was fun. And then, so cute, because our granddaughter is turning 5, and I think this is going to be probably her best year ever, in the sense that she's old enough to really appreciate it, but still young enough to really appreciate it. And so just spontaneously she would say, "I love Halloween," or "Halloween's so much fun." And she was dressed up like Cinderella. And while my daughter and her had got her costume from Value Village, had found a secondhand costume and happened to spot an adult version very similar. And so Emily wanted my daughter to also be Cinderella. And if you know my daughter, she's so not Cinderella, as in she's just not into all the frilly girly stuff. So bless her heart, she that's true mother love. She bought that dress, and so she went out in her dress and tiara along with Emily in hers. So one place someone said something about her, how pretty she looked, and she said, "I'm a queen and my mom's a princess." And another one, someone complimented her, said she looked really nice. And she said, I know, I'm Cinderella. And she didn't last a long time. We probably did about 3 blocks, and she was ready to go home. And she told me she'd gone to every house in the universe. So I just love the innocence and the enthusiasm and such. It was a really fun time. Enjoyed watching her so much. So yeah, I've had dentist appointment since I got home. I've had eye appointment. I got new contacts, got fitted for new contacts, so that's wonderful. They're definitely better than my old ones, so I'm all set for a while between glasses and contacts. I had forgotten I had agreed, or volunteered is more like it. I'd volunteered to host our next ladies' night get-together the week we got home. So I had some house cleaning and stuff to do and get ready for that. But it was fun as always. It was an extra job. Back to curling, and then this past weekend we went to Victoria to go see my mother-in-law. It was a long weekend. We usually go over Remembrance Day weekend because it gives us an extra day for it, and plus it was Cameron's 40th high school reunion on Saturday night, so he went to that and quite enjoyed himself. So we had a good weekend, but it's sort of been one thing after another since we got home. And so my something good this week is the chance to sort of return to more regular routine, not so many things going on. My exercise routine's gone out the window. My eating well's gone out the window. So it's time to regroup and just get back to some good habits and just a more regular routine. So I'm looking forward to that. Just being able to take a breath or two. And of course, then it'll be Christmas before you know it. But I'm going to enjoy a little bit of regular time before gearing up for that. So if you're still with me, thank you. It's been I know this is going to be a long episode. But if you're interested, stick around for the changing of the guard and the glass blowing. Cameron took some video of the boat cave tour, and if I can get it onto my computer, I'll also put a little bit of that in there to give you an idea. So if all goes well, as I always say, I will be back again next week with another episode. So take care until then. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye. It's great to be back.
Remembrance! March!
Fui! Ah, mas sim. Né?
making a glass demonstration for you. You have the possibility to see the two main techniques we use in Murano to produce our wonderful objects. The blowing technique and the sculpturing technique. Now he is just preparing the glass to blow a little flower vase. It's going to blow through the hollow pipe in order to create an air bubble into the glass. Glass is very soft and liquid. At the same time, once the glass is blown, he has to control the shape using the tool. Using the tools. The tools and the technique never change. We are using the same tool and the same technique of many centuries ago. In Murano, still today, 2019, no technology at all. The only things that are very modern are the oven, 1200 Celsius, over 2000 Fahrenheit, gas fire. Once we were using coal, and before the coal, wood. Where do you come from? United States?
No, Canada.
Canada. All of you, okay. Canada. So you're familiar with the Celsius, right?
Yes.
Good. 1200 Celsius.
Well.
Now, as you can see, the glass is getting colder. The temperature, to be more precise, collapsed. And that's why now he cut the piece on top, turned the vase upside down on the pipe, and back in the oven to reheat it. This is quite normal in the blowing technique. You always start working the low part of the object. When the low part is done, you turn the object, you reheat it, and you work on the upper part. This operation can be repeated several times, and every time you can add colors, you can add handle, you can add ornaments. Now, if I have time, I'm gonna make a little handle over the vase. Hello. Allora, normally this part of the job is made by real workers. Okay, not me. It's too hot.
Questo mi piace.
So this is very important to understand one thing. If you want to make artistic production, the maestro must be helped by a team of people. Sometimes 5-6 persons working all together on the same piece. Otherwise it's impossible to make the very nice objects. And here we are. Allora, he put a piece of paper just to let you understand about the real temperatures when we are working. Glass is still very hot, and that's why when the object is finished, must be cooled down immediately into another oven for at least 24 hours. 1 day complete of a slow cooling and 600 Celsius with the different colors. Now back to the oven. You see? This is not for the show. This is what happens. Now it's very easy in the oven. After that he's making the sculpture, and these little pieces will become spots of color on the sculpture. This is one of the techniques to make the multicolor pieces. You can overlay afternoon